The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome, parentheses, back, close parents, to the Formed Book Club discussion here with Vivian Dudrow, myself, Father Festo, and Joseph Pierce. We're still discussing this incredibly rich book, The Drama of Atheist Humanism by de Lubac, and we finished the first three parts, which actually were the original book, and part 4 contains 2 chapters which came later. But, I mean, the great blessing of this chapter of the Church of the New Man is that this is kind of de Lubac now expressing in his own words all the results of what he's done, the historical research he's done on the 19th century. And I mean, I'm sorry, I almost want to read the whole thing. It's so beautiful. And this is written, 1945, 47. So what's that, 40 from 2, that's 80 years ago?
But remember, we discovered last time that this section must have been worked on later than that.
Yeah. Yes, but it was given as a talk originally.
Yeah, originally, but he continued to revise and update, it looks like, based on the notes.
But, I mean, is it a concise description of exactly where we are right now in the spiritual struggle?
Yes.
And the response to it? I mean, this is really...
I mean, it does show, that ideas have consequences, because this is really about the 19th century. And then we're seeing how de Lubac's saying this is playing itself out in the 20th century. And here we are, well into the 21st century. And we see these cankered fruits still coming to cankered fruition.
And we don't know what the outcome will be, except ultimately that Christ, eternity, transcendence, God will prevail. But after what desolation, after what devastation that we bring about by trying to create a society in which God is mocked?
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways we can look at this apocalyptically. One is, that it's the end and it's going to be the apocalypse itself. Or this will be another example in human history of pride preceding a fall. Although because we have this technological power now, the fall might be one hell of a bigger fall than we've had before. And then we're left picking up the pieces, and then people return to Christ because there's nothing left, right? So that's the other possibility as I see it.
Well, before the apocalypse with the capital A at the end of time, which no one knows when that will be, there are mini apocalypses with small a's where we bring about our own destruction. But the good part of that is that it's always an unveiling, a revealing of some truth that now hopefully we have something on which to rebuild. One can hope that we learn.
Yeah, we look at scripture, look at the Old Testament, look as far back as Homer and the Iliad. It's the anger of Achilles, his prideful anger, and his destructiveness. That Homer's telling us about pride preceding a fall 3,000 years ago. I mean, it's the same cycle, and we never learn.
Interesting you bring up Achilles too, because as de Lubac has used this expression, the rebellion that starts in resentment. And why was Achilles angry? He was resentful that King Agamemnon took away his war booty.
Right.
That's what he's angry about. He's not angry that his comrades are falling in the field, no, it's this pouting over, well, he took my stuff.
Yeah. And back to your thing about the apocalypse with the capital A and a small a, that's also true of the Antichrist.
Yes.
With a large A and a small a.
Yes.
There's already Antichrist among us. But is it the Antichrist? Well, we don't know.
We don't know. And maybe that's wise that we don't know, because in God permitting what we know and what we see, I trust in his wisdom.
Yeah, we're not supposed to know the hour.
That's right.
We just have to be ready, right? Simple as that.
Yeah. Well, And what a blessing. Like, here we are doing this together, and others can share with us here, but we're still here. And we haven't suffered unto blood yet, as Hebrews says. But we look around us, and there are so many signs of hope. At least this seeds of eternity have been planted, they will bear fruit. What goes on around us, we're not sure. But just like Christ, we're being invited to live, pray, and suffer on their behalf in their place. So that hopefully we can pray for all to be saved.
That is right. That is right. So no matter what happens, you can always unite that to the sufferings of Christ. I mean, that should be a great comfort that you're united even more closely with Jesus whenever you're called upon to suffer, large or small.
Amen.
Good. Let's we left off around page 420. Excuse me. Section 4 of this chapter on the search for a new man. And interestingly, I mean, this is the idea where the 19th century, they were looking for a new humanity, a new man, a new order, novus ordo seclorum, a new order of the ages, but without God. And the Lubach's going to point out, well, where did that lead? And what's the real new man? And I think we stopped last time. We quoted that
I
first
was wondering,
sentence.
may I interrupt just a second?
You always interrupt. You may always interrupt.
Thank you.
I'm not saying you always do, but you always may.
Well, both can be true. But it's not only a society without God. I think a really important little qualification, it's to come up with a society that can supplant God. That's why God becomes the enemy of these projects, because they want to supplant God. They want to do for man what only God can do for man. And that's why they have to get God out of the way.
God is present in their desire for his absence. You know, Flannery O'Connor said about the South, the Christ-haunted South, but Nietzsche and Marx and Comte and the other people we looked at, they're Christ-haunted. Right? They're haunted by the presence of Christ, and they're Christ-hated. Not hated by Christ, but they hate Christ. And so they don't want him to exist. So he's very much present. He's present by their desire for his absence. There's the paradox.
Well, that's the whole thing with Marx. It's not just that the capitalists have sucked dry and exploited the working class, but God has sucked dry and exploited all of its own, I can't call it creation anymore, but the universe. And therefore, we must recognize him as a projection of our desires for the classless, happy society. But it's a mere projection. Once we get rid of God, that idol, that projection, we will then be able to have the perfect society over time. You may have to sacrifice for it. You may have to die without any afterlife in order for the future. Not much of a motivation for most people.
Right. And also the other thing, of course, not just you may have to die because they're not Christians, you may have to kill.
Oh,
Be willing to do it by the million.
Yeah, that's the better way. Don't die, but kill. So I think we quoted that sentence at the beginning of section 4 on page 420. There could thus be, let us dare this paradox, a Christian Prometheus. Prometheus is in the Greek myths, who stole the fire of the gods and therefore was able to begin technology, really. And the Lubach is saying the Christian answer is not that we've fallen into irremediable misery because we've fallen from this ideal spiritual realm, and therefore the only way to the future is to leave and abandon and reject and deny any activity on earth for the beatific life afterwards. And Lubach saying that's not the Christian way at all. That's not a Christ way at all. We're here to redeem time, not to escape time. Onward, Joseph, you're in charge. It doesn't sound like it, seem like it, but I want to try and make it seem.
So obviously this theme of the Christian Prometheus, which we concluded with last week, and was an eye-opener, paradigm shifter for me. I'd always accepted and embraced the idea of Prometheus is a rebel against the gods and therefore God. And of course, we get a whole different way of seeing it from here, which I'm very grateful for. It's broadened my understanding. But the next thing I have after that first sentence at the beginning of section 4 on page 420 is 422. So we did actually, I know this because I highlight passages. We jumped ahead last time a bit, and we've already discussed 422 and 423 and 424. I'm not saying we can't do it again, but we did do it last week. But what I've got here is that this quote in 1937 by Father Teilhard de Chardin, talking about Marxism. It's the bottom of page 422. What created the temptation of neo-Marxism for an elite, he wrote, was far less its humanitarian message than its vision of a totalitarian civilization strongly connected with the cosmic powers of matter. The true name of communism should be earthism or terranism. And then at the end of that paragraph, are they not all condensed in Nietzsche's cry, which has been taken up again by so many of our contemporaries, nothing but the earth? What I find very interesting here is the way that socialism, and particularly the Marxist form of it, has morphed into an elitist, globalist sectarianism based upon a radical relativism, which is itself based upon a radical materialism. Whereas, in the early days, and not Marx himself, but certainly the socialist movement, which precedes Marx, was about social justice. It was about it being humane. It was about the working class and trade unions in a good sense, and agrarianism in a good sense. So that, if you like, has been hijacked by these atheist humanists. And that's why now we see the Pride movement, which is on the so-called left, absolutely in bed with the global corporations and the globalists with the same agenda. And so ironically, now words like populism are swear words. How dare, in a democracy, a politician be popular, right? Clearly, the purpose of a politician is to serve the elites. So the whole idea now, the radical left are the stormtroopers of globalism. It's ironic. It's actually comic in a tragic sort of way.
Yes, and this idea of socialism or communism or trying to reduce inequalities between rich and poor. Of course, in the early church, in the Acts of the Apostles, there was communism, voluntary. They gave all their property and their goods together to serve each other and to serve the poor and the widows and the orphans. Through the life of the church, we've had religious orders, thousands and thousands of them with millions and millions of members who have given up all their earthly wealth in order to pray and serve others, but it's voluntary. And then for those who are under religious orders, the idea of tithing, that you're responsible for your neighbor and others, and at least take 10% of your wealth and help those who do not have what you have. I mean, this has been part of the church's teaching forever, since the beginning, but not imposed by the state, who collects your taxes and then decides where it's going to go and so on.
Yeah, I mean, so again, it's ironic because this is true freedom, right? Where basically you act voluntarily, through your will, through your free will. This is true freedom, as opposed to coercion, right? We now have huge political bodies or huge economic bodies that are coercing people to behave in the way that suits them.
So I had actually, on the page before 422, 421, a couple of things.
Yeah.
Before that bottom paragraph, about 8 lines up from that, the little box says, does not the new power that man feels being born within him, this idea of the new man, incite him by reawakening and reinforcing the attraction of ancient rebellions to a false effort of creation, less concerned to collaborate in the divine work, that's the Christian answer, than to mimic it and reverse it, that is to play God. 3 lines down in that new paragraph, humanity no longer sees anything today but its effort toward earthly construction. And then I don't know, I'm going to give into this temptation on page 422. I'll just read this slowly. We can comment on it. It starts 4 lines down. Finally, reversing the movement that was for millennia the spontaneous movement of man's intelligence, instead of seeing invisible and tangible realities, so many signs of the invisible kingdom to which he believed himself destined. So man saw all these things in creation as images of something divine, something to work towards. He no longer wanted to recognize any of these conceptions of any spiritual order except groundless symbols. That is, they're symbols of nothing. Heavenly city, beatific vision, communion of saints, eternal joy. Those are symbols of nothing. Definitively outdated today. You got to get rid of those. Of the sole reality of this world, which science is at last handing over to him. So, now we didn't have science before, so we had to believe in some kind of outside force to help us. After having, he thinks, long projected into a mystical heaven, the social reality he was living or imagining, that is just peace, classless society, love, he affirms that he has reached adult age. Oh, yes, we're the adults in the room, right? By reducing everything to the earthly plane and by explaining everything by it. So the essential reproach he addresses to the Christian mystery. So here's what modern philosophers, sociologists, leaders, elites are saying about Christianity, similar to what Origen once addressed in the name of this mystery to the Jewish religion. That is to say, Origen said, wait a second, the Old Testament was preparing for the new. These were figures of the reality. You've kept the figure and you're not accepting the reality of Christianity. They're saying he reproaches the figure for Origen, Old Testament, for modern man, Christianity, for its refusal to disappear in the face of the truth that fulfills it. And finally, all theology is for him reducible in anthropology. Everything we say about God is really about man. And then here's the clincher. And we talked about this last time, I think. The 3 things: scientific intoxication, that is the idea that science will solve everything over time. Ontological rebellion, that is, we don't accept God as the source of being. Noetic reduction, that is, noetic means knowledge, that is to say, there's no knowledge except science. Such are in sum the 3 temptations by which the progress of our age is accompanied. Temptations to which it has largely succumbed and which have opened the spiritual crisis in which we are struggling. I mean, can you describe the situation we're in in a more condensed fashion than he just did?
Yeah, that's the genius, I think, of de Lubac, is his succinctness to look at the hugeness of what we're discussing here, and then to I almost said reduce, not reduce, but to distill it down to categories that make it very digestible for us. So scientific intoxication, which doesn't mean just being drunk with, it means being poisoned by, right? Ontological rebellion, so rebelling against who we are, and then noetic reduction, reducing everything to the level of matter. I mean, so he's done here it's not even a sentence, right? It's the first part of a sentence. He's basically summarized succinctly for us the 3 main temptations, as he calls it, by which progress of age is accompanied. I mean, it's brilliant. He has a great gift.
Temptations to which we have succumbed.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
That's right.
But therefore, it just is increased motivation for us and to respond to the world with the true answer, especially because these are temptations, they lead to a fall. They lead to inner incoherence, to inner disorganization, to suicide, to fentanyl, to gangs, but they're searching for something they cannot find in the direction they're searching it for. And so what are we here for? To show the light. They'll call it a hate crime. They'll call it bigotry. But we have to do it with love. I can't do that part, but I leave Vivian to handle that side of it.
Well, he does, and I quoted this last time about how on 424 he says that the whole of reality of which man is a part surrenders something of its meaning only to a loving and disinterested gaze. How could it be understood by someone who is seeking only to explain the phenomena with a view to submitting them to his manufacturing ends? And then, so without love, you can't even see what's in front of you to know what should be done about it. And unfortunately, the object of science now in this project that we're living through, the object of science now is not just the material world, it's man himself. Man himself is now the object of science to undergo manipulation through scientific methods and propaganda methods and whatever methods. So this is what makes the modern, most recent version of this has been around for a while, but the degree to which now you and I are under this microscopic lens to be remade in the image of these other people by whatever means they can get away with.
Well, also, yeah, and the precise image of that is that technology was being used to try and create a better order for society. But now they want to implant technology into human beings.
Yeah, they want
to create a better person.
Their project is to remake man himself. And of course, but back to this point of love, you don't even love man. That. No. How can you possibly know?
The reason they don't just want to remake man; they want to remake man in their own image.
Yes.
And the reason they want to remake man in their own image is because they're supercilious and proud, and they look down upon men, all of whom are inferior to them and their understanding of who men should be. So they want to create a master race, right? Which is a master race made in their own image. And of course, that means because human beings are stupid, you've got to use machines, which they worship. This is scientism basically trumping humanity.
You know, one of the greatest witnesses to the truth is Leo Pierce.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
This is going to seem like just a random digression, but I saw a movie reviewer taking on one of these new slasher movies that's out. How right around Halloween, always these awful, chainsaws and God knows what else. These kind of slasher movies, which I don't watch, and I didn't bother to read the review either, but the very first lead was something like, you would only hate this movie if you happen to love humanity. And I just thought, if that guy only knew what he was revealing by that comment, I mean, if your starting point is contempt for your fellow man,
right?
Yeah, you'll just turn into a mass murderer. You're not going to make things better,
right?
Onward to what's your next, Joseph? Where do you?
For me, I have nothing actually. I have page 427, 3 lines down.
Oh well, I'm unfortunately I marked a lot of things in this. This section at the end of this section, wherever that was, a little ways beyond here, I wrote. Something like
431.
Yeah, 431. I said the whole section is magnificent. That was what I said. So on page 426, 3 lines down, Jaspers, a philosopher, of the 20th century, says, "It is necessary to recapture this total image of man." He added, "Let us also add that the most profound and most certain philosophy would be practically powerless to do so. That we're not going to solve this problem by more philosophy. In order to rediscover this total image of man, which is lost, and with it this sense of being, this conception of a stable truth, and this confidence in eternal values, which snatches us from a stifling objectivism as well as from pure subjectivity, we must make appeal to our faith in the creation of man, the image of God. That is, say, you're banging your head against the wall if you try and solve this problem by philosophy, sociology, or science. And then down
Yeah,
to the
but
bottom of the
it's the old adage which the atheists try to use against Christianity, that if God didn't exist, it was necessary to invent him, right? Therefore, all notions of divine are our projections because we needed God, and now we no longer need him. We can liberate ourselves from him. But the fact is that this is actually an argument for God's existence. If God is necessary, right, then it proves the fact that he is, well, it's a proof of his existence, right? If he's necessary, if he's needed, then he must exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So that again, this whole notion that we invented God. No, we need to invent God in inverted commas, because we can't do without him.
bottom of the page, buddy, it lines up. Here we touch on the profound evil of our time. Okay, what is that? The profound evil of our time. On that rebellion against God, which was the temptation of all centuries, it's not new, but which in our own takes the most radical and least disguised form. So now it's not disguised anymore. Because for the first time, this collective persuasion has arisen, powerful as a tidal wave, that the hour of man has finally sounded. The hour of the finite being who is self-sufficient in his immanence and his finitude, and who in his immanence and his finitude takes over all the prerogatives of God. So that's how we characterize the difference. I mean, there's always been rebellion against God, but now it's become explicit and undisguised.
Although it's still disguised, it's not disguised for someone with the discernment of Henri de Lubac, but it is disguised from a lot of people who still have their faith in what you just read before, intoxicated with science and rebelling against God and reducing what they can know down to the things they can measure and quantify and so on. I mean, that does describe now a lot of people, even people who may also at the same breath say they believe in a God or something, or eternity life, or they're spiritual or something, and yet, I mean, it's disguised for a lot of people. It's not disguised for de Lubac because, Nietzsche himself was explicit about what he was doing. But how many people bother to really read him?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I can actually, the part I was going to read, Father, and you went back a page, takes over from where we just left off, and I want to comment upon it.
Okay.
So, the folly of the humanist and the folly of the overman, and it is this folly which corrupts the grandiose dream of conquest and organization that modern man has formed. Because of it, the more he undertakes to dispose of nature entirely, the more he separates himself from it and is enclosed in a lunar world of lunacy, of asphalt and concrete. He was made to be king. His rebellion makes him a slave. So I wrote a book called Small is Still Beautiful, which was taking a look at E.F. Schumacher's book, Small is Beautiful, published in 1973, which was hugely influential. Schumacher basically built his understanding of economics and political philosophy on the social teaching of the church. And one of the things he said in that book is that we are now trying to defeat nature, to overcome nature, not realizing that anyone who defeats nature destroys himself. In other words, it's a self-defeating exercise. I mean, it's Francis Bacon famously said that in order to can't remember. No, I'm going to mess that up now. But basically, we have to become servants of nature in order to be able to actually command it. There's this sort of paradoxical relationship going on here, and I think he also quotes something which was somewhat humorous. He spoke to a Soviet economist, and he says that the capitalist West is like a train that's heading for the abyss, but we're going to get there first. Not realizing, of course, the contradiction, the inanity of it.
There's not much left in this section, but I don't think we're going to finish it in a
He just gave us the
minimal
time.
time. So let's conclude here, and we'll start again on page 428. So everyone who's still listening or watching, we'll see you next session, starting at page 428. God bless you.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumedbookclub.ignatius.com.